Rob here at etrailer.com, and today you're going to be taking a look at the Curt T-connector vehicle wiring harness on our 2018 Jeep Compass. Now our Curt wiring harness is going to provide us with a 4-pole flat trailer connector so we can have all the required lights to safely and securely get down the road with our trailer, like our tail lights, our turn signals, and our brake lights. Now in our application, we decided to mount our wiring on the outside using a 4-pole bracket. That way it's easily accessible when we hook up our trailer. However, keep in mind that the Curt wiring is designed to stay on the inside of the vehicle until you're ready to use it, but it's not that hard to get on the outside, especially if you want it by your receiver tube. And the wiring is going to come with a dust cover, and if you do mount it on the outside, that's a really nice thing. It's going to keep all that dirt, debris, and moisture out of the connector whenever we're not using it. Now the really nice thing about our wiring is we're not going to have to cut or splice into our factory wires. I know a lot of customers really don't want to do that, especially to a newer vehicle, and I don't blame you. But it's going to be a super simple installation. We can pull our taillights out, and instead of cutting anything, we're just going to have a T-connector that's going to plug in line with our taillights. That way it'll take the signal and it'll go to the converter box, which is going to convert that signal to a working signal for our trailer. But it's also going to protect our Jeep in case there was a problem on the trailer end. It's not going to backfeed and cause any problems to the electrical system. Not to mention that our wiring is going to be fuse protected as well. So we are going to have to run a wire from the converter box up to the positive post on the battery. But now that we've seen what our wiring looks like and gone over some of the features, let's walk through the installation together. To begin installation, we want to open up our rear hatch. We're going to remove our rear threshold. So we'll come to where our tie-down hooks are. We want to flip the hooks out of the way, and then at the very back here where that little indentation is, you take a flat blade screwdriver or something small and you want to pop that cover open, and that'll expose the fastener holding it in place. I want to grab a T40 Torx bit and we'll pull that cargo tie down out. We're going to pull out the one on the other side as well. Now if we open up the floor covering, we can get access to the bolts that are holding our threshold in place too. We'll have one in the very center and then one on each corner. I want to grab a T25 Torx bit and pull those bolts out. We're going to grab the very corner and bottom of the threshold panel. You want to lift upward and you'll hear the clips popping loose. And you just want to start working your way across. And once you have it loose, you want to be really careful not to pull too hard, because we're going to have a sensor back here for our lift gate. Now it's just held on by a couple posts and these rubber plugs, so we can pull the rubber plugs off. Make sure you hold on to them, and then we can slide that sensor down, and we can set that panel aside where it's not going to get damaged. Now on the driver's side, we're going to have this little pocket right here. We can actually just lift up and set it aside. We'll go ahead and pull the passenger side out as well. But then we'll come to the edge of our panel here, and I'd suggest using a plastic trim panel tool or just using your hand if you don't want to scuff up the material. But you want to come underneath the panel and you want to start working your way towards the side and prying against the panel. Should get the clips to release. You can hear one of them popping. We're just going to work our way up till we can get that panel to loosen up. We have a little bit more room to work with. Now if we come to that cubby hole in the driver's side, we should have a little rubber grommet that we're barely going to be able to see right on the edge of where the opening is. That grommet is going to go outside to our taillights. So I'm going to grab the grommet and pull it to the inside of the vehicle. So you should have kind of that oblong shaped grommet. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut a slice in here so I can pass my wires through and just make it a little bit easier to get to the outside of the vehicle. And whenever you're cutting this, you just want to be careful. You obviously don't want to cut the wires. You just want to cut enough of the rubber so that we can slide our wire in place and seal it back up. And then we'll just move right outside to where our taillights are. We're going to have these two covers covering up the fasteners. Just get a flat blade screwdriver or something small, flip those covers open. You want to start at the top and fold them down so they don't break. Then we can grab a T30 Torx bit and we're going to remove the two fasteners holding our taillight in place. careful not to drop them. It is a little bit tight to fit in there to grab them with your fingers. And when we're going to pull our tail light out, you want to be extremely careful not to move it too much side to side. A little bit's okay, but we want to pull back as straight as we can because there's going to be some alignment pins and we don't want those to break. Pull straight back and that'll give us access to the wires. There's a little small tab on the connector. Push in on it. We should be able to wiggle it loose and pull it out. We'll set our tail light aside where it won't get damaged. At this point, we're going to grab our harness that has the T connector with the yellow wire connected to it, and you'll notice that these are going to match up to the ones in our tail light. So we're going to take the free end with the 2 connectors on it. We're going to feed it into the hole where we just removed that grommet from earlier, and we're going to pass it out and upward until we can reach our hand on the outside of the body and grab the wire. It's a little bit of a tight fit, but you can see I got my hand in there just enough to grab the edge of it and then pull the slack through. Now we'll just take the matching ends, we'll plug them up. I'm going to make sure they lock into place, so give them a quick pull test. Then we can take our tail light, plug it in, and reinstall it on the driver's side. And once you plug it in, you want to make sure to press in that locking tab. And we just push our wires down out of the way. We can put all the hardware back in for our tail light. Now I'm going to take my T connector that has my green wire on it. I'm going to run it along the threshold, and there's actually some wiring there so we can use it to secure it along the factory wiring, and we're going to do the same method over on the passenger side. Now off of our converter box, we should have a white wire with a ring terminal coming off of it. This is going to be our ground wire. And we're going to find either a nice flat spot of sheet metal that we can attach it to using the provided self-tapping screw, or we can find an existing ground that's already on the vehicle. Now fortunately for us, since our wiring is going to be in here, and our converter box and everything else should be inside this panel right here, it'd be a really nice spot to go directly against the floor, because there's nothing underneath there. We don't have to worry about any kind of interference or damaging anything. So I'm going to take the included self-tapping screw, I'm going to start a hole, remove it, and then secure my ground wire. Whenever you put your ground in, you want to make sure that screw's tight to where that ring terminal is not moving, but you don't want it to strip out. Now the last wire coming off our converter box should be a black wire with a free stripped end on it. This is going to be our power wire. Now this is going to have to run up to the battery, but obviously that's not enough, but they do provide us with plenty of length of 12 gauge wire as well as some butt connectors to extend it. So I'm just going to take my yellow butt connector, I'll crimp it onto the end of the wire coming off the converter box. And then I'll find the end of my length of wire. I'll strip it back and crimp it into the other end of that butt connector. Now there's a couple different ways of how you can get your wire to the positive post on your battery. You can run it along the interior panels, come to the firewall, find a way to go through the firewall. However, we're going to be mounting our 4-pole on the outside as well. So if we look back in this hole that we have all of our stuff in, on the bottom floor section, there's a grommet that's going to be right behind this fuse panel. That's going to be a really easy, good spot to go through, so we can pass our 4-pole wire, so it'll be by our hitch, and we can get our power wire out to the outside of the vehicle, run it along the frame, and come up from underneath to the battery. So I'm just going to reach in, and I'm going to pull that grommet out. And I'm going to feed my 12 gauge power wire and my 4-pole wire all the way down until I have all the slack underneath. Now that all of our wires are in place at least, we need to secure our converter box. Now you can use a zip tie and tie it to some existing wiring, or you can do what I'm going to do, and you can use the double-sided foam tape that they provide you in your kit. We'll take the backing off one side, stick it really good to their converter box, remove the other backing, and then we'll find a nice flat surface inside this panel that we can attach it to. Right against the wall right here, nice flat surface. It'll give us plenty of room to clean up our wires and get everything we need to. And just like the other one, I'm going to cut the grommet to where there's a little slit. That way I can put my wires in between, put my grommet back in place. So my wire came out right behind my rear wheel well, right underneath the fascia right here. Now I'm going to go ahead and run my wire up to the battery. You should want to keep in mind whenever you're routing yours, you want to stay away from any heat sources like the exhaust or any moving components like the steering or suspension. But I'm going to go ahead and run this and I'll show you how I routed it there. So I ran my power wire towards the front. I went over the rear subframe brace. Once I got to about the fuel tank, I went to the outside here, started following along these existing lines. I actually tucked my wire underneath this cover where these other lines are so it's nice and secure. And it stopped right here, right behind the front sub brace. But we can see, I already ran an airline tube from the top of the engine bay down. And again, same thing. You want to avoid any heat sources, anything moving. So you really want to pay attention to how your airline tube, coat hanger, or whatever you're using to drop down. You want to pay attention to how it's going down. And then we'll take our wire that we ran. And since this is an airline tube, I'm just going to push it in to the tube a little bit. But if you're using a coat hanger or something that doesn't have anything you can put it in, I'm going to put some tape on there, then we can move back up top to the engine bay, grab our wire, and pull everything through. Whenever you pull your wire up to the engine bay, you want to make sure to pull all the slack up. You don't want to have a wad of wire hanging down underneath that could potentially get it caught on something. So it's not a bad idea, just take a quick look underneath after you have it pulled through, make sure that is all the wire, and we don't have no more slack underneath. I always like to find a good spot to anchor my wire to, up top of the engine bay. That way I don't have to worry about if there is any slack, it's not going to fall back down and get caught on anything. Just anchor it to the cable right here. And we can open up the cover on our battery. Just have these two tabs, push in, lift up, and that'll expose the positive terminal on the battery. Now we need to go ahead and cut our power wire to length. So I always like to give myself a little bit of extra, so I'm just going to cut my wire, and then I'll strip back the end of it. We can grab one of our yellow butt connectors from our kit. We'll clip it onto the other end of our wire. We can grab our fuse holder out of our kit. Now this is going to be pre-stripped, so we can just grab the end, pull the wire off. We'll slide one end into our butt connector and crimp it down. Now on the other end, we'll remove the insulation. We'll grab the ring terminal out of our kit, slide it over our wire and crimp it down. Now I can grab a 13mm socket and remove the nut off the top post. Take our wire, we can slide it over the post, and we'll just replace the nut. And just replace the cover. Then we can put our fuse in place. Now that we have everything hooked up, now would be a good time to go back into the back section. We can clean up all of our wires and put all of our panels back in place. You're going to get some black silicone in your kit, and I suggest that you go back at the end and seal all the grommets up that we cut. That way we don't have to worry about any kind of leakage coming into our Jeep. Now I went ahead and put some electrical tape on the end of my 4-pole, just about 6 to 12 inches up, because we're actually going to be mounting ours to our hitch. Now if you're not going to be mounting it, you can still leave it on the outside, And what we can do is we can take our dust cover, slide it over our 4-pole wiring on the end, and we can use our dust cover to keep our connector off the ground just by hooking it onto the safety chain loop, and then we can tie up all the excess wire to where it's not hanging down. However, in our application and on our hitch, we have this no-drill bracket already mounted. So we're going to mount a 4-pole bracket and have our wiring there, so it's a nice, neat little package. Now the bracket is going to be sold separately, but you can find it here at etrailer.com. And they're really easy to put on. Just got 2 screws and a couple nuts to hold it in place. So we'll get our hardware in. We'll come back and tighten it up with a 10mm socket. And once you have it mounted, you simply just take your 4-pole connector, push it through. There's a couple little tabs that are going to catch those ears there, and that's what's going to keep it from pushing back out the back side. But now our wiring will be right here ready for us in a nice little neat package. All we got to do is just tie up all the excess wiring here, and I suggest tying it up as far back to the corner as you can so we can stay away from the muffler right here. Now the final step of our installation is going to be testing our wiring. We want to make sure all of our circuits are working properly, so I went ahead and plugged in my 4-pole tester. You can pick one up here at etrailer.com, or you can use your trailer to test your wiring also. But if I go ahead and turn on my headlight, we can see that my tail light function is working, as well as the left side turn signal, the right turn signal, and my brakes. But once you know everything's working properly, you're ready to hook up to your trailer and hit the road. And that'll finish up your look at the Curt T-connector vehicle wiring harness on our 2018 Jeep Compass.